What happens when two of television's most recognizable personalities find themselves in an unexpected clash that leaves an entire studio frozen in silence? In today's fictional story, we're exploring a dramatic confrontation that no one could have predicted. Stay with us until the very end, and don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments about this unforgettable showdown. The bright studio lights illuminated the familiar set as the hosts of The View settled into their seats around the iconic table. Joy Behar adjusted her glasses and organized the stack of notes in front of her with the confidence that came from decades of experience in live television. Everything appeared routine, yet an unusual sense of anticipation lingered throughout the studio. Crew members exchanged curious glances, sensing an atmosphere unlike any ordinary broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our special guest, media icon and philanthropist Oprah Winfrey. The announcement was followed by enthusiastic applause as Oprah stepped onto the stage with her trademark poise and confidence. Smiling warmly, she greeted the audience before taking her place in the guest chair. Dressed in a crisp white blazer that reflected the glow of the studio lights, she immediately became the center of attention. Her calm presence seemed to command the entire room without a single word. "Oprah, it's wonderful to have you back with us," Whoopi Goldberg said with genuine warmth. "Thank you, Whoopi. It's always a pleasure to spend time with all of you," Oprah replied, offering her signature smile as the audience applauded once again. While the atmosphere remained friendly on the surface, Joy Behar leaned forward with a noticeably more serious expression, signaling that the conversation was about to take a very different direction. "Oprah," Joy began, "there's something I've wanted to ask you for quite some time. One of your recent interview specials has generated a great deal of discussion. Some critics believe it gave controversial guests an opportunity to present questionable claims without being challenged enough." The room grew noticeably quieter. Although Oprah's smile remained, her expression became more focused. "I'm not entirely sure which interview you're referring to, Joy," she answered calmly. "Could you be a little more specific?" Joy didn't hesitate. "I think you know exactly which one I mean," she replied, her tone becoming firmer. "The interview where your guest made several highly disputed statements, and many viewers felt there wasn't enough pushback or fact-checking during the conversation. Several of the co-hosts exchanged uneasy looks as the discussion suddenly became far more intense than anyone had expected." Oprah straightened slightly before responding. "I think that's an unfair characterization," she said evenly. "My role has always been to create an environment where guests feel comfortable speaking openly. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm endorsing everything they say." "Their perspective is one thing," Joy responded quickly. "Verified facts are another. When millions of people are watching, simply allowing questionable statements to go unchallenged can be interpreted as giving them credibility." The audience became completely silent. Around the table, the remaining hosts watched carefully as neither woman backed away from the conversation. Sunny Hostin appeared ready to interject but remained quiet, while Sarah Haynes sat motionless, unsure whether stepping into the exchange would help or make things worse. Despite the growing tension, Oprah maintained her composure. "Joy," she said firmly, "I've spent more than 40 years interviewing people from every walk of life. I understand the responsibility that comes with having a public platform. My approach has always been centered on conversation rather than confrontation." Joy immediately shook her head. "And that's exactly where we disagree," she replied. "There are moments when remaining neutral isn't enough. Sometimes journalists and interviewers have a responsibility to challenge claims directly instead of allowing audiences to sort everything out on their own." Her voice grew more passionate with every sentence as the audience listened without making a sound. An almost surreal silence settled across the studio. No applause. No laughter. Not even the usual murmurs from the audience. Everyone seemed captivated by the increasingly tense exchange unfolding before them. Even the camera operators appeared unusually focused, carefully following every expression and every pause, aware that the conversation had become far more intense than anyone had anticipated. Every eye remained fixed on the table as the debate continued to build toward an uncertain conclusion. Oprah leaned back in her chair, the surprise on her face gradually giving way to quiet determination. Her voice remained measured, but there was unmistakable steel beneath every word. "False neutrality," she repeated. "Joy, with all due respect, I think we're looking at journalism through two very different lenses. To me, it's not about forcing every guest into agreement with my perspective. It's about asking meaningful questions and allowing people to reveal who they are through their own answers." Joy let out a short, humorless laugh. "Reveal themselves," she replied. "The only thing that interview revealed was how willing you were to avoid difficult follow-up questions. There was a time when people admired you for challenging powerful voices instead of protecting them. What happened to that, Oprah?" The remark settled over the studio like a thundercloud. For the first time since the discussion began, Oprah's calm expression tightened ever so slightly. "I think it's remarkable," she answered carefully, "that you're willing to question my integrity so confidently." "My integrity?" Joy shot back. She rose from her chair, her voice echoing across the studio as producers behind the cameras exchanged anxious looks. "You're the one who's changed, Oprah. Somewhere along the way, being universally admired became more important than standing firmly for your convictions. That's what people are seeing." The audience remained completely silent. The only sounds were the soft movements of the cameras and the quiet hum of studio equipment. Oprah slowly stood as well. Standing across the table from one another, the two television veterans filled the room with an intensity that made everyone forget the cameras were even there. Every person in the studio watched without blinking, aware they were witnessing an extraordinary fictional confrontation. Oprah spoke softly, yet every syllable carried unmistakable authority. "Joy, think carefully about the accusation you're making. You're suggesting that I've abandoned the principles that guided my entire career. That's a serious claim." Joy's hands trembled slightly, but her voice never lost its conviction. "Yes, it is," she answered. "Because I believe someone has to say it. There was a time when you asked the uncomfortable questions. You highlighted difficult issues and gave overlooked voices a chance to be heard. Lately, it feels like you've become more interested in keeping every conversation comfortable." A faint smile appeared on Oprah's face, though it carried little warmth. "You may think you understand my work," she replied, "but I don't believe you understand my intentions at all. I've never been afraid of criticism. What concerns me is criticism that's built on assumptions instead of facts." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Whoopi Goldberg finally leaned forward. "Ladies," she said cautiously, "maybe we should slow this down for a moment." Without taking her eyes off Joy, Oprah raised a hand. "No, Whoopi," she said calmly. "If we're going to discuss principles, then let's discuss them honestly." She turned back toward Joy. "You've suggested that I've stopped standing for something. Fine. But let's also talk about accountability. Every day, people with public platforms have a responsibility for the tone they set. That responsibility belongs to all of us." Joy immediately answered. "I'm accountable for everything I say. I don't hide behind carefully chosen words." Oprah's expression remained composed. "Do you?" she asked quietly. "Or do you simply say whatever creates the loudest reaction? There's a difference between starting meaningful conversations and creating controversy simply because controversy attracts attention." The room seemed to freeze. Around the table, the remaining hosts exchanged nervous glances. Sarah Haynes shifted uneasily in her chair, while Sunny Hostin repeatedly glanced toward the control room, silently hoping someone would signal for a commercial break before the debate intensified even further. Joy stepped closer to the table, determination replacing every trace of hesitation as the confrontation showed no signs of ending. "How dare you?" Cassandra shot back, rising from her chair. You come onto this program and question everything I've worked for, as if you know me. Do I? Evelyn replied calmly. She stepped away from her seat, moving slowly around the table. Every movement was deliberate, every word measured. I've watched your style for years, Evelyn continued. You choose opponents you believe are easy targets. Instead of debating ideas, you make the conversation personal. And the moment someone challenges you, you claim you're the one being attacked. I don't play the victim, Cassandra answered sharply. I'm genuine, something you've forgotten how to be. She folded her arms. Everything about you feels rehearsed now. Every interview, every smile, every carefully chosen sentence. It isn't authenticity anymore. It's branding. Evelyn stopped and faced her directly. For several long seconds, neither woman spoke. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. A brand, she asked quietly. Perhaps. But I spent decades building something that reached beyond headlines and television ratings. I worked to create a legacy. Tell me, Cassandra, what do you hope yours will be? My legacy. Cassandra repeated, her voice tightening. My legacy is refusing to stay silent. It's challenging people with influence, even when they're standing right in front of me. Evelyn slowly shook her head. No, she replied. Your legacy has become confusing conflict with courage. Somewhere along the way, you started believing that creating drama was the same as pursuing truth. The room fell completely silent. The audience watched without moving, sensing that the debate had reached a point where neither side was willing to retreat. The tension in the studio had reached its breaking point. Cassandra glanced around the table, silently searching for support from her fellow hosts. Instead, she found only uneasy expressions and uncomfortable silence. Even the audience seemed afraid to breathe, as though any sound might push the confrontation past the point of no return. You know what, she said at last, her voice suddenly calm. I've had enough. She paused, locking eyes with her guest. I'm done pretending this conversation is productive. I'm done sitting here while you question everything I stand for. Evelyn folded her arms and regarded her steadily. So what happens now? She asked. Are you walking away because it's easier than answering difficult questions, or are you willing to keep discussing the issues we've raised? Cassandra reached for the microphone clipped to her jacket. What I'm going to do, she replied, unclipping it with deliberate care, is refuse to be part of this spectacle any longer. She placed the microphone on the table with a firm thud that echoed through the silent studio. Without another word, Cassandra turned toward the stage exit, her movements controlled and purposeful. Cassandra, wait, the moderator called after her. Let's not make any decisions we'll regret. But she didn't stop. Her footsteps echoed across the studio floor as she walked toward the curtain. At the edge of the stage, she paused briefly and looked back. I once believed this conversation could accomplish something, she said quietly. Now I think it's become more about winning than understanding. With that, she disappeared backstage, leaving the remaining hosts and the audience in stunned silence. Cassandra, wait. The moderator finally found her voice, rising halfway from her chair. Let's not make a decision we'll regret. But Cassandra was already moving toward the stage exit. Her footsteps echoed across the studio floor with steady determination, each one seeming louder than the last. Just before disappearing behind the curtain, she stopped and looked back one final time. There was a time when you inspired people to become their best selves, she said quietly. I hope one day you find your way back to that. Without waiting for a response, she disappeared backstage. A heavy silence settled over the studio. For several long moments, no one spoke. Even the audience remained perfectly still, stunned by what had just unfolded. Evelyn stood motionless, her expression impossible to read as she stared toward the empty doorway. Around the studio, camera operators exchanged uncertain glances, unsure whether to focus on the vacant chair or the remaining guests. The moderator cleared her throat, attempting to restore some sense of normalcy. "Well, I don't think any of us expected that." "You don't need to apologize," Evelyn replied calmly, taking her seat again. Her voice was steady, almost unnervingly so. She made her decision. Instead of continuing the discussion, she chose to leave. Another panelist shifted uneasily. "Maybe we should take a short break," she suggested. "Perhaps she'll cool off and be willing to come back." Evelyn slowly shook her head. "I don't believe that's necessary," she answered. "If someone no longer wants to participate in a conversation, forcing them to return serves no purpose. Difficult discussions aren't always comfortable, but avoiding them doesn't make the disagreements disappear." The room fell silent once more as everyone absorbed the weight of the moment. Another panelist leaned forward cautiously, breaking the uneasy silence. "Do you think things went a little too far?" she asked. "She's been part of this program for a long time." A faint smile crossed Evelyn's face, though there was little warmth behind it. "Longevity doesn't automatically equal excellence," she replied evenly. "Sometimes staying in the same place for years simply means you've grown comfortable. Comfort can be the enemy of growth." The audience listened in complete silence, captivated by every exchange. This wasn't the calm, reassuring public figure they were accustomed to seeing. There was a new intensity in her voice, as though years of carefully restrained opinions had finally found an outlet. The panelist hesitated before asking another question. "Even so, she did raise concerns about your interview. Don't you think at least some of her criticism deserves consideration?" Evelyn let out a quiet laugh. "Constructive criticism always deserves consideration," she said. "But criticism should be rooted in facts, professional standards, and a genuine effort to understand the issue. When it's driven by personal frustration or assumptions, it stops being productive and becomes little more than noise." The words settled over the studio, leaving the remaining hosts exchanging uncertain glances as the conversation continued. "She's convinced my success somehow came at her expense," Evelyn said evenly. "When criticism becomes personal instead of constructive, it stops being about principles." The moderator leaned forward, determined to guide the discussion back to calmer ground. "I think everyone here is trying to understand how this escalated so quickly," the moderator said. "From where we're sitting, it feels like this came out of nowhere." Evelyn slowly turned toward her. "Did it?" she asked quietly. The question lingered in the air. "I've heard the whispers for years. The subtle remarks, the sideways comments, the quiet attempts to diminish everything I've spent decades building. Today wasn't the beginning of this conversation. It was simply the first time someone decided to say those thoughts aloud." Another panelist spoke carefully. "There was never any intention to disrespect you. We all recognize everything you've accomplished." A faint smile crossed Evelyn's face. "Recognition and respect aren't always the same thing," she replied. "It's easy to praise someone's achievements publicly while privately dismissing the work that made them possible." The control room buzzed with nervous energy as producers debated whether to cut to a commercial break or allow the discussion to continue. Around the studio, every eye remained fixed on the table. "The real issue," Evelyn continued, her confidence growing with every sentence, "is that we've become too comfortable rewarding conflict instead of curiosity. Real conversations require people to ask difficult questions without treating every disagreement as entertainment." The moderator raised a hand, hoping to slow the momentum before the discussion became even more heated. "Evelyn," she said calmly, "perhaps we should pause for a moment before we go any further." For the first time since the debate began, the room fell completely silent as everyone waited to see what would happen next. "Evelyn, perhaps we should move on." The moderator's words were cut short as Evelyn gently raised a hand. "Please," she said. "Allow me to finish." The room fell silent once again. "My principles have been questioned today," Evelyn continued. So let me explain what those principles mean to me. They're not about having the loudest voice in the room or winning every argument. They're not about chasing applause or headlines. She paused, allowing the silence to settle. They're about consistency. They're about building something that outlasts the news cycle. Most importantly, they're about using influence to create meaningful change instead of simply creating noise. Evelyn slowly rose to her feet. Her calm presence seemed to command the entire studio. What happened here today only reinforces something I believed for a long time, she said. Real conversations become difficult the moment people stop debating ideas and begin defending their pride. When that happens, dialogue gives way to division. Not a single person in the audience moved. Every eye remained fixed on the stage. And that's the part I find most disappointing, Evelyn continued, her voice softening. Every public platform is an opportunity to inform, to challenge, and to encourage thoughtful discussion. Those opportunities are rare, and they shouldn't be wasted. Another panelist cautiously spoke up. To be fair, she's spent years supporting causes that matter to many people. I respect anyone who works sincerely toward positive change, Evelyn replied. But meaningful action speaks louder than repeated declarations. The impact of our work should be measured by what we build, not simply by what we say. The words lingered in the air. After several long seconds, the moderator finally broke the silence. I think this has certainly been one of our most unforgettable conversations. A genuine smile appeared on Evelyn's face. Perhaps, she replied. But I hope people remember it not because it was dramatic, but because it encouraged them to think. Turning toward the audience, she offered one final thought. The most valuable conversations are rarely the easiest ones. Progress often begins with the willingness to listen, question our assumptions, and speak honestly without losing respect for one another. She gathered her belongings, thanked the hosts for the invitation, and quietly left the stage. The studio remained unusually still. The moderator looked into the camera before speaking with measured professionalism. We'll take a short break and be right back. As the lights dimmed and the cameras pulled away, one thing was clear, the discussion would continue long after the broadcast had ended. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and let us know which debate you'd like to see next.